Love, please. You're just my financial plan until someone richer comes along. Those cruel words spilled from Melissa's lips as she leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass with a smirk that cut deeper than any blade. Her husband, Adrian, froze, the fork in his hand trembling as the weight of her confession crushed the last illusions of their marriage. But what Melissa didn't know was that Adrian wasn't the broken man she thought he was. He had already prepared a devastating response that would leave her pride shattered, and her world burning to ashes. Melissa's words hung in the air like poison. The clink of cutlery from nearby tables suddenly felt like mockery, each sound magnifying the silence that had fallen between them. Adrian sat frozen, his fork suspended mid-air, the half-cut steak on his plate forgotten. Melissa didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned in closer, her perfume filling his lungs with a sweetness that now felt suffocating. Her smirk widened. "Don't look so surprised, Adrian. You knew what this was. Did you really think I married you for your kind heart? For your silly dreams of being, what was it again? An architect?" She chuckled bitterly, her diamond bracelet flashing as she waved her hand dismissively. "Please, I married stability. I married comfort. And you were convenient. That's all." Adrian's chest tightened. The words didn't just sting. They ripped through every memory he had of the last 6 years. Every late night he'd stayed up finishing blueprints so he could fund her luxury tastes. Every birthday gift, every vacation she demanded. It all made sense now. He had been nothing more than a wallet and a suit. Around them, waiters moved like shadows, carefully averting their eyes. But one thing was clear. Melissa wanted this humiliation to be public. Her voice was pitched just loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Adrian noticed the sidelong glances, the whispers, the subtle pity in strangers' eyes. Melissa leaned back, sipping her wine as if it were victory itself. "You're fading, Adrian. Look at you. Your firm is crumbling, clients are disappearing, and you're holding on to scraps. Do you think I'm going to sit here and sink with you? No, darling. I'm going to rise. And the moment I find someone who can take me higher, you'll be history." Her words were sharp, deliberate, each syllable designed to carve his pride to pieces. But Adrian didn't break. Not yet. He swallowed the bitterness and looked at her with an unsettling calm. He had always been quiet, the kind of man who preferred to think 3 steps ahead before making a move. Tonight, Melissa mistook his silence for weakness. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He placed his fork down gently, dabbed his lips with the napkin, and said only 3 words. "Are you sure?" Melissa laughed, the kind of cruel, mocking laugh that made heads turn. "Oh, I've never been sure of anything in my life. You're finished, Adrian, and when I'm done with you, the world will know just how pathetic you really are." Adrian nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. Inside, his mind was racing, not with anger but with precision. She thought he was finished. She thought she had cornered him. What she didn't know was that her little performance had just set the stage for the kind of revenge that would echo far beyond this dining hall. And when it came, Melissa wouldn't just lose Adrian. She would lose everything. The drive home was silent, but it was the kind of silence that screamed louder than words. Melissa sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the glow of new messages, her lips curling into tiny private smirks. She didn't even bother hiding them anymore. Adrian gripped the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his mind was far from the car. Every cruel word from dinner replayed in his head, but instead of anger, there was clarity. He remembered something his father used to tell him: never wrestle with pigs. They drag you into the mud and enjoy it. A man's revenge isn't noise, it's silence. Until the roar. Melissa thought she had broken him, but Adrian wasn't the man she believed him to be. He had been hiding something, not because he was weak, but because he was patient. And patience was a weapon. When they pulled into the driveway of their mansion, the one Adrian had bought outright. Though Melissa boasted to friends she secured it, Melissa snapped her purse shut and opened the door without a word. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she strutted inside, tossing her shawl carelessly onto the couch. Adrian followed, his movements slower, deliberate. She turned to him with that same smirk. "Don't sulk, Adrian. It's embarrassing. You knew this was coming. I gave you years of my best and now you're running dry. A woman like me doesn't wait around for scraps." He met her gaze and said softly, "You've made yourself very clear." Melissa blinked at his calm tone, thrown for a second. She had expected shouting, pleading, maybe even tears. Instead, he looked composed, almost amused. "Good," she said, brushing past him. "Then don't make this harder than it has to be. I'll be meeting with Victor tomorrow. He knows how to treat a woman like me." Victor. Adrian didn't even need to ask. He knew the name. A slick investment banker with a reputation for burning through money as fast as he earned it. Melissa thought Victor was her golden ticket. Adrian almost pitied her. Almost. That night, when she finally drifted off in the master bedroom they no longer shared in spirit, Adrian sat in his study. He unlocked a drawer Melissa never bothered to open. Inside were documents. Not just any documents, but ironclad contracts, shares, and deeds. Melissa believed his architectural firm was failing. What she didn't know was that Adrian had diversified years ago. Silent partnerships in construction companies, hidden stakes in real estate developments, offshore accounts. On paper, he looked like a man slipping into ruin. In reality, he was sitting on an empire she couldn't even begin to fathom. And now, as he leafed through the folders, Adrian knew one thing for certain. Melissa's betrayal had given him the perfect excuse. He would no longer play the quiet, dutiful husband. He would let her walk into her own trap, let her greed pull her deeper, and when the time was right, he would pull the ground out from under her feet. Adrian closed the drawer with a click, leaned back in his chair, and whispered to himself, "So be it." Upstairs, Melissa stirred in her sleep, smiling faintly as if dreaming of Victor. She had no idea that the man she thought was finished had just declared war. The next evening, Melissa walked into a high-end restaurant in Lagos like she owned the place. Her red dress clung perfectly, her diamonds glittered beneath the chandelier, and her laughter rang out before she even reached the table. Victor was already there, tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored suit screaming wealth. He stood as she approached, kissing her hand dramatically. "Melissa," he drawled, "now this is the kind of woman who deserves to be seen." Melissa's smile widened. The sting of last night's dinner with Adrian had already faded, replaced by the intoxicating rush of validation. She leaned close, her voice dripping with false modesty. "Well, I was starting to think I deserved better." Victor grinned. "Then you were right. Adrian can't keep up. Men like him build houses. Men like me own cities." Melissa giggled, tossing her hair. Every word Victor spoke was like champagne to her ego. Around them, diners stole glances, not at Victor, but at Melissa. She reveled in the attention. But what Melissa didn't notice was the discreet figure seated 3 tables away. Adrian. He had come not to beg, not to fight, but to watch. His calm expression masked the storm brewing beneath. He sipped his water slowly, unseen, while Melissa leaned into Victor's promises. "Do you know what Adrian said to me last night?" Melissa whispered with a cruel laugh. "He actually asked if I was sure. Can you believe it?" That man still thought he was in control. Victor's eyes glittered, then let him stay in his delusion. "He's yesterday's news. Stick with me, Melissa, and you'll never have to worry about scraps again." Melissa's hand brushed over his, sealing what she thought was a new chapter of luxury. She had no idea Victor's wealth was shallow, tied up in risky ventures and dangerous debts. She had no idea that Adrian, the man she mocked, was quietly observing every move, every word. Adrian's phone buzzed once under the table. A message from his longtime associate, Femi. "All papers ready. Just waiting for your signal." Adrian's lips curved slightly. The timing was crucial. He couldn't strike too soon. No, he needed Melissa to think she was winning. He needed her to feel untouchable, to dig herself deeper into Victor's illusions. When Melissa excused herself to the restroom, Adrian finally rose. He walked past Victor's table, his presence unnoticed. But just before leaving the restaurant, he glanced back at Victor, a quiet, knowing look. The kind of look a predator gives another predator before the hunt begins. Victor felt it. He shifted uncomfortably, though he couldn't explain why. Melissa returned moments later, oblivious to the subtle tension that had passed. She took her seat, her laughter resuming, her illusions intact, for now, because Adrian wasn't just letting her go. He was setting the board, and soon every piece would fall exactly where he wanted it. Within days, Melissa made no effort to hide her affair with Victor. What had once been whispered conversations and discreet outings turned into full-blown public appearances. She paraded him at social gatherings, arriving arm in arm, laughing too loudly, letting her diamond earrings catch the light. Neighbors whispered, colleagues raised eyebrows, and family members shook their heads. But Melissa thrived on the scandal. For her, humiliation was not collateral damage. It was the point. At one Sunday brunch, she leaned in toward Adrian's sister, flashing her brightest smile. Honestly, dear, you should thank me. I'm teaching Adrian a lesson. Maybe now he'll stop clinging to me like some desperate puppy. Victor is a man, not a boy playing house with silly blueprints. Adrian's sister stiffened, her jaw tightening, but she said nothing. She had seen the quiet fire in her brother's eyes. He wasn't broken. He was waiting. Adrian himself endured Melissa's spectacle with unnerving calm. He still attended events, still carried himself with quiet dignity. When friends pitied him, he simply smiled. When business associates offered sympathy, he replied only, "Everything is under control." Behind that calm mask, though, gears were turning. Adrian met discreetly with lawyers, accountants, and his trusted associate Femi. Every conversation was precise, measured. Properties were shifted quietly. Contracts were amended. Power was consolidating. And Melissa was too busy flaunting her illusions with Victor to notice. But the more Adrian kept silent, the bolder Melissa became. One evening, at a friend's lavish birthday party, she made her boldest move yet. Adrian arrived alone, dressed in a simple but elegant suit. Heads turned, but the whispers weren't pity anymore. They were curiosity. He looked calm. Too calm. Halfway through the night, Melissa swept into the ballroom with Victor on her arm. Cameras flashed, gasps echoed, and the room buzzed. Melissa thrived in the spotlight, and as she crossed the room, she made sure to stop in front of Adrian. "Adrian," she purred, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I see you came. How brave of you." Victor smirked beside her, adjusting his cufflinks like a man claiming territory. "I hear business isn't treating you well," he added mockingly. Adrian's eyes didn't flicker. He looked at Melissa, then at Victor, and finally said, "Enjoy the party." His voice was so calm, so steady, that Melissa's smirk faltered for a split second. But then she laughed, tossing her head back dramatically. "Don't worry," she announced loudly, making sure every guest within earshot could hear. "I'll send you the details when the divorce papers are ready. Consider it my parting gift." Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian simply nodded, turned away, and walked toward the balcony. Melissa thought she had won. She thought she had delivered the final humiliation. But as Adrian stood under the night sky, the city lights reflecting in his calm eyes, he whispered to himself, "Almost there," because he knew the truth. Melissa's loudest victories were nothing but seeds of betrayal, and soon they would bloom into her downfall. The night of the party had barely ended before Melissa escalated her cruelty. By the next morning, photos of her with Victor had already made it to social media. Tagged, shared, whispered about. Adrian's phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, each one a stab at his reputation. Melissa sat at the breakfast table scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "Look at that, Adrian. We're trending. Isn't it cute? Everyone's finally seeing what a real man looks like beside me." Adrian stirred his coffee unbothered. He simply nodded. "Interesting." Melissa narrowed her eyes, frustrated by his calm. "Interesting? That's all you have to say?" "Patience, Melissa," he said quietly, placing his cup down. "Life always has a way of revealing who people really are." She scoffed and returned to her phone. To her, his calm was pathetic resignation. But to Adrian, it was control. That afternoon, Adrian made a call to Femi. "It's time," he said. Within days, opportunities began accidentally falling into Victor's lap. A property deal with unusually favorable terms, an investment proposal that seemed too good to ignore, a contact who whispered of an exclusive government contract. All of them, of course, carefully planted by Adrian's hidden network. Victor, blinded by greed and eager to impress Melissa, took the bait every time. He boasted about his genius deals to Melissa, who ate up every word, parading him around as the man who outshone Adrian. At a dinner party 1 week later, Melissa leaned close to a group of wealthy wives, her voice syrupy sweet. My darling Victor just secured a multi-million naira deal. Can you imagine? Poor Adrian could never dream of such numbers. I chose well. The women laughed politely, though some exchanged wary glances. Adrian's silence in the corner unsettled them more than Melissa's bragging. Because while Victor flaunted fake victories, Adrian's moves were invisible, precise. He wasn't fighting for Melissa's attention. He wasn't fighting to prove his worth. He was building the perfect stage where Melissa would realize too late that she had backed the wrong man. That night, as Melissa slept soundly beside her phone, Adrian sat in his study again. He opened a folder containing Victor's financial records, courtesy of a private investigator he'd quietly hired months ago when Melissa first began drifting away. The records painted a grim picture: debts, lawsuits, shadowy creditors. Victor was a man living on borrowed time. Adrian closed the folder, his lips curving into that same quiet smile. He whispered to himself, one push. Upstairs, Melissa dreamed of a future she thought she had secured. The mansion, the parties, the endless flow of wealth. But the truth was, the trap was already snapping shut. And soon she would wake up to a reality far harsher than any dream. Melissa was radiant as ever, strutting into the lounge of a five-star hotel on Victor's arm. Cameras flashed, heads turned, and she drank it all in. She loved this new life, the champagne, the whispers, the spotlight. To her, Victor was proof that she had traded up. But beneath Victor's polished smile, Adrian's invisible trap was already working. At dinner that night, Victor's phone buzzed repeatedly. He excused himself 3 times, each time coming back with a forced smile. Business, he muttered, brushing it off. Melissa didn't press, and not yet. She was too caught up in the fantasy. But the next day, fantasy collided with reality. Victor pulled up outside her mansion in a glossy sports car. But Melissa noticed the subtle detail. The driver kept it running, as if it wasn't fully his to command. Inside, when the waiter brought the bill for lunch, Victor forgot his wallet. He laughed it off, charming the waiter with promises of a double tip tomorrow. Melissa covered the bill, but her smile tightened. Later that evening, she overheard a heated phone call when Victor thought she was in the shower. I told you I need more time. The money is coming. The contracts are solid. Just give me a week. Don't you dare threaten me. Melissa froze at the bathroom door, the steam rising around her as reality crept in. She wrapped her towel tighter and stepped back silently, pretending she hadn't heard. But the seed of doubt had been planted. At a gala 2 nights later, Melissa noticed something else. The investors Victor bragged about avoided his gaze. Conversation shifted when he approached. A few polite smiles, but no respect. Adrian, on the other hand, stood across the room, quiet as always, speaking to men in dark suits who leaned in when he talked, who laughed genuinely at his words. Melissa's stomach churned. She pushed the thought away, clinging harder to Victor's arm, laughing louder, flaunting herself with reckless abandon. She couldn't afford to admit she might have chosen wrong. And Adrian? He watched from across the hall, his calm eyes revealing nothing. But inside he felt the tide turning. Victor was walking right into the web. Melissa was trapped with him. That night, when Melissa confronted Victor gently about his phone calls, he kissed her hand and laughed it off. Sweetheart, you don't understand big money. It's pressure, yes, but it's all part of the game. Trust me, in a few weeks we'll be untouchable. Melissa smiled weakly. But as she drifted to sleep later, her mind replayed Adrian's words at the breakfast table days ago. Life always has a way of revealing who people really are. She didn't know why, but for the first time she shivered. Melissa loved attention, but she was about to discover that the wrong kind of attention cuts deeper than silence. At a charity gala 2 weeks later, she swept into the grand ballroom draped in a golden gown, Victor at her side. Cameras clicked, and for a moment she basked in the familiar rush. But as she moved through the crowd, the energy felt different. Whispers trailed behind her like smoke. She caught fragments. Isn't that the one who left her husband? I heard Victor owes half the city. Such a shame, she thinks she upgraded. Melissa's smile stiffened. She tightened her grip on Victor's arm, but when she glanced at him, his jaw was tense, his eyes darting nervously across the room. Then, the humiliation struck deeper. Across the hall, Adrian was speaking with the Minister of Works and a group of international investors. His suit was simple, but the authority in his presence was undeniable. When he spoke, men leaned in. When he laughed, they laughed too. He wasn't flaunting, he didn't need to. Respect clung to him like a tailored coat. Melissa's stomach churned. She forced herself to look away, focusing on Victor. But the cracks in his facade were widening. When an associate approached him about a failed deal, Victor's voice rose slightly, defensive, almost desperate. People noticed. Eyebrows lifted. Conversations paused. Melissa tugged him aside, whispering harshly. "What's going on?" Victor plastered on a smile. "Nothing. Just business politics," but Melissa wasn't convinced, and the whispers around her grew louder. The women she once lorded over now gave her pitying looks. The men who used to flirt now avoided her gaze. It was a different kind of spotlight, one she couldn't escape. Later that night, when she excused herself to the powder room, two society wives lingered nearby, not realizing she could hear. She left Adrian for this, traded a diamond for glass. Mark my words, when Victor's bubble bursts, she'll be crawling back. Melissa's hands trembled as she reapplied her lipstick. She pressed harder, smearing red across the corner of her mouth. For the first time, she felt something sharp. Fear. When she returned to the ballroom, Adrian's calm eyes met hers across the room. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply watched as if he knew exactly what she had just overheard. Melissa quickly looked away, but her chest tightened. She couldn't shake the thought. What if she had chosen wrong? What if Adrian wasn't the weak man she painted him to be? Victor squeezed her hand, pulling her back into conversation. But his palm was clammy, his smile strained. And for the first time since her betrayal began, Melissa's confidence faltered. It began with a phone call. Melissa was lounging by the pool of Victor's rented villa, sipping a mimosa when Victor's phone buzzed violently against the table. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening, then ignored it. Moments later, it rang again. And again, Melissa frowned. "Who keeps calling you like that?" Victor forced a smile. "Business. Don't worry about it." But when he thought she wasn't looking, he stepped inside, voice low, tone harsh. "I told you I'll have it by Friday. No, you don't understand. I will deliver. Stop calling me or—" Melissa's blood ran cold. She set her drink down and stared at the door. For the first time, the word debt flashed across her mind like a warning sign. 2 nights later, the warning turned into reality. They were leaving a high-end restaurant when 2 men in dark suits intercepted Victor at the door. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes were not. "Mr. Victor," one of them said smoothly, "we've been waiting for you. A little matter of 30 million naira overdue. Perhaps we can discuss it now?" Melissa froze, clutching her clutch bag tighter. People were watching. Cameras flashed. This wasn't private humiliation, it was public. Victor's face flushed red. "Not here," he snapped, pushing past them. "I said I'd handle it." The men didn't stop him. They simply exchanged a look, one pulling out a small notepad. "We'll be in touch soon." Melissa's stomach twisted. She forced a smile at the curious onlookers, pretending nothing was wrong, but inside panic bloomed. That night she confronted Victor in his penthouse. "What was that? Debt collectors? 30 million? You told me you had everything under control." Victor slammed a glass onto the table, shards flying. "I do have it under control. Don't question me, Melissa. This is how big money works. Risk, debt, leverage. You wouldn't understand." Melissa flinched, her heart pounding. For the first time, Victor's charm cracked, revealing something darker, desperate. The next morning, she noticed something else. Her credit cards, the ones Victor had promised to cover, were suddenly declined. She stared at the message on her phone. Transaction denied. Insufficient funds. Her cheeks burned. She thought of the women at the gala, the whispers, the smirks. Shame pressed down heavier than the Lagos heat. Later that week, Melissa spotted Adrian again, this time at a boardroom unveiling of a new housing project. He stood at the head of the table, investors applauding, cameras flashing. He looked every inch the man she once mocked, but stronger, sharper, untouchable. Their eyes met across the room. Adrian gave her a polite nod, nothing more. No mockery, no gloating, just quiet acknowledgement like a man who knew the game was already won. Melissa looked away, her throat tight. The words she had thrown at him, "You're just my financial plan until someone richer comes along," echoed back. But this time they cut her, because the richer man she had chosen was unraveling. and the quiet man she discarded was soaring higher than ever. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were loud, sharp, and everywhere Melissa went. At a luncheon with old acquaintances, the women who used to envy her diamonds now exchanged pitying looks. One of them, bold enough to cut through the polite charade, asked bluntly, "So, Melissa, is it true Victor's facing lawsuits?" Melissa's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. She forced a laugh, waving her hand as though brushing away a fly. "Please, Victor? He's on the verge of the biggest contract of his life." People love to gossip when they're jealous, but the women only exchanged knowing glances. Melissa's cheeks burned. For the first time, she realized she was no longer feared, no longer envied. She was pitied. And pity, she discovered, was worse than hatred. That night back at Victor's penthouse, things got worse. The doorbell rang. Melissa opened it to find the same two men in dark suits from before. Their smiles were gone this time. "Mr. Victor," one said firmly, "our patience has limits. 30 million tomorrow." Melissa's stomach knotted. She stammered, We'll handle it." The man's cold eyes swept over her. "Be sure that you do, or consequences will follow." They left without another word, but the silence they left behind was heavier than any threat. Melissa turned to Victor, panic in her eyes. "What are we going to do? 30 million? Do you have it?" Victor snapped, pacing like a trapped animal. "I just need more time. The investors are pulling back. Contracts delayed." "Damn it, Melissa, stop panicking." Melissa grabbed his arm. "Victor, listen to me. If you can't fix this, She stopped. The words on her tongue tasted bitter. She didn't want to say them. She didn't want to admit them, but she couldn't shake the image of Adrian at the boardroom table, calm, composed, powerful. She remembered his quiet words after her public taunt. "Are you sure?" The shame hit her like a tidal wave. The man she humiliated, the man she publicly spat on, was thriving. And here she was, clutching at a sinking ship. That night, when Victor stormed out to chase yet another opportunity, Melissa sat alone in the silent penthouse. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hands trembling, and whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her bank, final warning. Account overdrawn. Her heart sank. She remembered the day she had mocked Adrian at that dinner table, swirling her wine glass with arrogance. Now, in the same motion, the glass slipped from her trembling hand, shattering against the marble floor. Melissa sank to her knees among the shards, tears finally spilling down her face. For the first time, she wasn't the woman in control. She was the woman falling apart, and though she didn't want to admit it, the thought pressed harder and harder into her mind. She might have to crawl back to Adrian. Melissa hadn't slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, the same nightmare played. Victor's voice, sharp and panicked, shouting at creditors. The cold eyes of men in dark suits. And the whispers, always the whispers, and she chose wrong. She chose wrong. When her own bank account froze completely, Melissa finally broke. One evening, she found herself outside Adrian's office building. It wasn't a place she'd ever been invited to before. The glass tower glistened against the Lagos skyline, the company name etched in gold at the entrance. Employees in sharp suits moved in and out, each one with a respect in their stride that made Melissa's knees weaken. Inside, the receptionist raised an eyebrow as Melissa gave her name. "Do you have an appointment?" Melissa swallowed. "No, but he'll want to see me." Minutes later, she stood in Adrian's office. It was nothing like she remembered him. The small home study with rolled-up blueprints. This was power. Polished mahogany desk, panoramic view of the city. Contracts spread out neatly before him. Adrian rose slowly from his leather chair, his calm eyes fixed on her. "Melissa." His voice was steady, not cold, not warm, just steady. Her lips trembled. "Adrian, She stopped, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "I made a mistake." Adrian tilted his head slightly as if studying a puzzle piece. "A mistake?" She stepped forward, hands clasped together. "Victor isn't who I thought he was. He's drowning in debt, Adrian. He lied, and Her voice cracked. "I was wrong about you, so wrong. I shouldn't have said those things. Shouldn't have treated you that way." For the first time, Melissa's mask of confidence shattered. Her shoulders slumped, her makeup streaked with tears. She wasn't the woman in the golden gown anymore. She was just a desperate woman begging for scraps of the man she once mocked. Adrian listened in silence. Then slowly he walked around his desk and stopped in front of her. His presence was calm, but his silence burned hotter than rage. Finally, he spoke. "Do you remember what you said at that dinner table?" Melissa's breath hitched. "Adrian, please." His eyes narrowed. "You told me I was just your financial plan, that when something better came along, you'd replace me. Do you remember?" Her tears spilled freely now. "I didn't mean it. I was stupid, blinded. Please, Adrian, I need you." Adrian leaned in slightly, his voice low, deliberate. "Melissa, life always reveals who people really are. And now you're revealed. Not to me, I've always known. But to yourself." Melissa's knees buckled. She dropped, literally kneeling on the polished floor of his office. "Please, Adrian, don't let me drown." He looked down at her, the woman who once spat venom into his face now broken at his feet. For a long, breathless moment, the room was silent except for her muffled sobs. Then Adrian stepped back, his expression unreadable. "I think you should leave." Melissa's sobs caught in her throat. She looked up in shock, searching his face for mercy, but there was none. Because this wasn't the weak man she discarded. This was the quiet man who had waited, who had built, who had risen, and now he was untouchable. Melissa stumbled out of Adrian's office that night, mascara streaked, her dignity in pieces. But Adrian wasn't done. He hadn't humiliated her with shouting or cruelty. He had done something worse. He had dismissed her like she no longer mattered, and the real blow was yet to come. 2 weeks later, the headlines broke. Victor Olawale declares bankruptcy, owing billions in debt. Investors flee as fraud allegations surface. The empire of smoke and mirrors collapses. Melissa woke up to the news splashed across every paper, every screen. Photos of Victor being escorted by authorities, his once proud swagger reduced to shame. She scrolled frantically, heart pounding as the articles painted the truth she had ignored. Victor was finished. Her phone rang. It was Victor. His voice was frantic, desperate. "Melissa, they're coming after me." "They'll come after you too. Pack your things and—" She hung up, trembling. She was ruined. Her accounts frozen. Her reputation shredded, her golden ticket exposed as nothing but rust. And then came the final twist. Melissa received an invitation, gold embossed, elegant. It was for the unveiling of a massive real estate project in Victoria Island. She almost ignored it, but the name on the letter made her heart stop. Cole Developments, CEO Adrian Cole. Her hands shook as she walked into the grand ballroom that evening. The room was glittering with Lagos's elite, ministers, foreign investors, tycoons. And at the center of it all stood Adrian, commanding the stage. The man she once called just her financial plan was standing as the architect of an empire, unveiling a project worth billions. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, and Melissa felt the ground slip beneath her feet. When Adrian spoke, his voice was calm, steady, yet filled with authority. "This project represents not just growth, but resilience. Building something real takes patience, discipline, and loyalty, traits I value above everything else." Melissa's eyes burned with tears. Every word felt aimed at her, though Adrian never once looked her way. But when the presentation ended, their eyes did meet. For a single crushing moment, Adrian's calm gaze locked on hers across the ballroom. Not with hate, not with gloating, but with something worse, indifference. Melissa lowered her eyes, unable to bear it. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Around her, whispers rose again, but this time there was no envy, no pity, only scorn. That's her, the one who left him. Imagine throwing away a man like that. Now look at her. Nothing. Melissa stood frozen, her face burning as humiliation washed over her. The woman who once thrived on being seen now prayed to disappear. And Adrian? He turned away, shaking the hand of another investor, smiling slightly. For him, the chapter was closed. Melissa was no longer his wife, no longer his burden. She was just another ghost of her own choices. Melissa left the ballroom that night like a ghost, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. But unlike the triumphant click-clack of the night she humiliated Adrian in court, these footsteps echoed hollow, carrying no pride, only shame. Outside, the flashes of cameras followed Adrian, not her. He stepped into a waiting black G-Wagon, bodyguards flanking him, the car door closing with the weight of finality. The man she once mocked for being just her financial plan was now a king in his own right. And she? She was nothing more than a shadow in the crowd. Weeks turned into months. Victor was sentenced, his empire exposed as fraud. His creditors tore apart what little was left, and Melissa, tied to his name and scandal, found herself blacklisted. Her so-called friends stopped answering her calls. The glamorous invitations dried up. She went from penthouses and galas to renting a modest flat with peeling paint and broken taps. The mirror became her enemy. She would sit for hours, staring at the woman who once believed she was untouchable, now gaunt with stress, her once flawless hands trembling as she held unpaid bills. One afternoon, desperate, she found herself outside Adrian's new headquarters again. She couldn't bring herself to go in, not after what happened the last time. But she waited across the street, watching him emerge from the building. He was flanked by executives, his presence commanding, his laughter deep and unrestrained. For a moment, her heart leapt. Maybe if I apologized again, maybe if I begged harder, maybe if... But then she saw it, Adrian's new partner. A graceful woman with natural beauty, dressed simply but elegantly, walking beside him with ease. Adrian glanced at her with a smile Melissa had never seen before. Genuine, warm, effortless. Melissa's chest caved in. That smile had once belonged to her. Now it was gone forever. Tears blurred her vision as she turned away, blending into the sea of Lagos traffic, swallowed by the noise. Adrian never saw her again. But sometimes in the silence of her tiny flat, Melissa would whisper the words she once spat with arrogance. "You're just my financial plan." And every time they burned her tongue like poison, because now she knew the truth. Adrian had never been her plan. He had been her chance, and she had thrown it away.